Hey gang, if you are an IT or business leader and you're currently sat on the fence about whether you should adopt the Apple Mac platform at scale across your organisation and thinking, is this a good idea? Well, the new podcast from SHI, We Got Your Mac, is a great way to help you make a more informed decision. I often get asked which podcasts I listen to, where I get ideas from, and season 1 of this particular podcast, We Got Your Mac, features Apple experts and customers that just share their advice and experiences of successfully introducing Mac to the corporate environment. If it sounds like something you'd be interested in, check it out. You can find out more at wegotyourmac.com to listen and learn more. And today I've got a distinguished guest who is at the forefront of transforming customer experience through technology. Because joining me today is David Morton, the Chief Revenue Officer at HGS UK. And HGS is a leader in optimizing customer experience, providing innovative solutions that ensure higher quality conversations and efficient customer service using things like cloud technology, automation, analytics, artificial intelligence. But David is going to be talking about how we need to look beyond the technology and focusing on solving real-world business problems and creating business strategies. It's a great balance, this one, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Harrogate in Yorkshire here in the UK, aka God's country. So it's a real pleasure to get him on the show, so let's get him on now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so hi everybody, my name is David Morton and I'm both Chief Revenue Officer and Chief Customer Officer at HGS. That's my role in the business right now.
Fantastic. Well, one of the things I always try and do on this daily tech podcast, get people thinking differently about technology, how it's impacted our life, our work, and sometimes even worlds. Now, given your extensive experience, I've got to ask, have you seen the role of Chief Revenue Officer in the B2B space evolve, especially over the last decade? Because the pace of technological change has just been breathtaking, and there's also an argument it'll never move this slow again. So what have you seen change, and what are the new responsibilities and challenges that CROs now face?
It's a great question. I mean, firstly, I think that the role of the CRO in its current guise didn't exist 10 years ago. I think that was perhaps... those roles and those responsibilities were across multiple senior stakeholders within the organization. And I think businesses have now tried to sort of solidify everything that's kind of growth and strategic growth, importantly, into one area to try and give it that increased focus. So I think that the challenges are more holistic than they were in the past, in terms of the CRO needs to be across the whole of the business, so often accountable for existing clients as well as net new, and I think that's a nuance different to in the past. I think that there's increased complexity around commercial models in the CRO space that there wasn't before. So I think, in years gone by, there were simple revenue deals and purchase orders for tens of thousands to millions or ongoing service cost. And now we're getting into the complexities of outcome-based models and digital transformation. And what does that do from a commercial modeling over time? So trying to balance the blend between tech and innovation. And what does that do for my business? And how do I put a commercial wrapper around that? I think that's changed fundamentally over the last 10 years. So ultimately under the guise of digital transformation, I guess. I think that overall, though, that the CRO is accountable for the overall growth strategy of the business. That's where the book stops, and everything that sits within it, sitting side by side with the CEO. I think that is what's fundamentally different to what would be, I guess, the sales director or the chief customer officer or customer experience director or whatever you used to blend that in the past. I think we've now put all of that together, and for me, it's a much more simplified and more strategic way of achieving business growth is having a single person accountable for the strategic growth of the business. I think the last point I'd make is that it's also incumbent on that role to be constantly kind of looking out to the what's next, identifying new opportunities in the market, to drive growth and maximize profitability. So I guess it's a collection of those things that I think are fundamentally different to the way we'll have worked perhaps 10 years ago.
And looking back at 2023, the very beginning, January, February time, it was AI that dominated conversations, continued to dominate conversations all through the year. It blindsided many business leaders to begin with. But if we attempt to look beyond the hype, beyond that buzzword status, I'm curious, from everything that you've seen, have you seen AI transforming the way businesses deliver things like customer service? And what are some of the real tangible benefits that you've observed at HGS?
So what? I'm going to spin it slightly, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I've probably been on record a few times to call AI the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've been, benefiting from the advent of automation through technology since the Enigma code in the Second World War. When Turing invented that, essentially he created a device that automated a process, and AI is doing that today. Decades later, and we've been on a journey since then, and we've been automating processes in the tech space for decades. And the latest flavor of that is AI. Whilst it's a fundamental shift and it's a great tool, and we can argue the pros and the cons of it in its own right, but specifically in the CX space, to your question, we've been delivering automation through some robotics, through chatbots, through multiple tools. And now many of those tools have got, an AI layer on them, making them a bit more intuitive and better. And that's, been very well encouraged by the market, by the vendors. Everybody seems to have an AI flavor of whatever it is they do, don't they? Otherwise, they seem to be sort of a bit lost in space. So it's a bit of a kind of a me too, isn't it? We've all got to have an AI. So whether you develop one in-house, do you develop your own processes? Do you partner with somebody, or do your partners have an AI strategy? And I really spin it all back, Neil, to almost saying, we shouldn't be just talking about an AI strategy. We should be talking about your business strategy. And what are the tools that are going to help you deliver that strategy? And if one of those is AI, then absolutely brilliant. And let's maximize and take the capabilities that we can from whatever tools that are out there. But in particular, I think AI is making the current automation tools that we already have better and more intuitive than they were previously. But I think sort of going forward, what we'll be using AI in my world for will optimize processes much more. We'll look to create greater levels of efficiency in that process, and it will make the processes much more intuitive. So, a bit like when you're trying to buy from Amazon, it's got all these really cool next best actions. They start to use large language models to learn more about Neil and Neil's preferences, so that we can suggest the next steps or the next product or the whatever. So, what I would say is, let's not just think about AI as the emperor's new clothes. Let's think, what are the business outcomes that we want to derive from it? And if Neil is now on a procurement journey, and one of the tools that I can put in place to make that a better journey, that makes either you more sticky, makes you purchase whatever it was you went online to do, or that your service inquiry is much better and more integrated and intuitive than ever before, then absolutely I would look to a technology such as AI to help improve that journey. But I don't think it's one solution. I think it's part of a roadmap of technologies that ultimately will help us be better placed to deliver better services, ideally from a service provider at a lower cost.
If I had a button that would play a round of applause, I would push it right now. As an exciting guy, I couldn't agree with you more. I've sat in those meetings many, many times, and the customer will always come in with, this is the new technology. This is great. We want some of this technology. And we'll, no, forget the technology. Start with the business problem. What do you want to achieve? Then we look at the technology. And 10, 15 years ago, it was a mobile app. Everyone wanted a mobile app for something, and we're going down that same road again, aren't we?
Yeah. And people, of course, are starting to think about this as a fully digital journey. Well, let's remember that not everybody wants a fully digital journey. I mean, if we look at how we communicate with Apple, we do that through digital channels, and almost they've got a dominant place in the market that they can push us through their channel of choice. Most people don't enjoy such a dominant brand position and need to attract customers and talk to them in the channel of your customer's choice. And that isn't always a wholly digital interaction where AI can help. When my mum wants to procure some products or services, she wants to speak to somebody. So, the channel of choice still needs to be, rest with the consumer. And as such, the term human in the loop, I think, is vitally important. Let's allow people, where possible, to be able to fully transact a service online and digitally if that's their gig. If they want to buy a new mortgage and they're very comfortable completing the end-to-end transaction through a digital process, and some are comfortable with that, then great. But actually, a lot of us might think I'm spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on this product. I really want to speak to Neil. I want to make sure that I can ask all of those pertinent questions, the stupid questions, and I want to get the feel that the people that I'm transacting with understand me as a consumer. And actually, there's plenty of times where we're speaking with vulnerable customers, people who are of a certain age demographic. There's a whole breadth of the community out there that doesn't want a wholly digital interaction. So a human in the loop aspect, either for all of the journey as an option or equally part of it. That Neil's done some self-service. He's done his ID and V. He's, briefly told me the nature of his inquiry. But actually at that point, then he does want to speak to somebody for an element of his transaction. So I think having these technologies that help improve the journey, but always having that option to have what we'll term the human in the loop, I think is really important. And we should still be offering that to consumers.
100% with you. And if we do have a business leader listening that's looking to further enhance the ability of their business to provide a more superior customer service, one that the customer is now increasingly demanding, it's become their standard expectation, without limiting ourselves to any technology. Where do you see this heading, that the ability to create that service? What are you expecting next year and beyond?
So, without wanting to sound too old school, I think we still need to focus on the business outcomes of our customers.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's ever going to change. I think, what is the business problem that we're looking to solve? And then let's have a sensible conversation about what it takes to help them on that journey. We may be able to fulfill part or hopefully all of that element, but let's have that as a sensible conversation. I think in terms of, how we engage with customers, or my customers in a B2B world, I think there's some fundamentals that we need to continue to do well. So deliver on your promises. The stuff that we talked about at the RFP stage when it's highly competitive and everybody's all jazz hands and AI this and technology roadmaps that and digital transformation the other, do what you promised. Absolutely. That's the very much the basics. I think continuing with a strategic partnership and having regular engagement with your customers is hugely important. Their business challenges will change. They could change month on month or have some seasonality. Let's say it was a retailer, or they have their own business challenges that we need to adopt. And if I've got a close working relationship with them, we can have those hard conversations when things aren't going so well. We can equally have those conversations about transformational change or, changing the way that we service their existing operation. So I think focusing on the business outcomes, and then I think once we do all of those things really well, is delivering that incremental insight. So go and tell your customers something about their business that they don't know. Tell them something about their market that they don't know. Tell them about what their competitors are doing, and bring them some insightful propositions that say, Neil, how about we do this? Have we thought about that? Have we? And it's okay if 3 times out of 4 Neil says, no, that's not right for my business. But be one of those partners that isn't just passive, isn't just doing what the bare bones of the contract says. Let's be those insightful people that understand the technology because we're faced with it on a daily basis. And let's take that with the insight of knowing our customers and knowing our customers' customers and what their current processes look like, because perhaps we're already servicing them, and take to them value propositions that say, Neil, how about we completely flip this by doing this? Or let's go and trial this as a technology. Let's go and implement it. And here are the business outcomes that could be put in your place. So, reversing right back to the start of your question in terms of, what's going to change? I don't think I will ever change my proposition in terms of what are the business problems that I'm looking to fix? Let's focus on the fundamentals. And then, we could be implementing a whole collection of cool and interesting tools and technologies to deliver those outcomes. But what doesn't change is me helping fix your business problems.
And that is so important, that belts and braces approach. It's not just about the technology. And I always say, 2,600 interviews, I've been harping on about technology works best when it brings people together, when you solve real world problems. And one of the things that stands about what you're talking about here, David, is how you're balancing technology and that human touch. But you do find yourself in this era where digital innovation is key. So I'm curious, how at HGS do you balance that use of technologies like, we almost need an AI swear box here, but AI and automation while maintaining that personal touch in customer service? Because that is the key element that's so important, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few ways of doing it and everybody will have their own view. But I think one of the things, we've already talked about the business outcomes we're looking to achieve. One way in the CX space is really to focus on customer journeys. So if 5 different customers were each going to contact us for 5 different reasons, what are they? And what's the optimized route? One could be, it's the contract end for my finance agreement on my car. And I simply want a settlement figure. You could argue from the consumer's perspective that actually just putting in some sort of automation technology that very quickly sends out through the post, because that's the UK regulated way of doing it, a settlement figure. So that could be an appropriate technology. Let's now look at it from the business's side. If I were BMW Finance and you're at the end of your finance agreement, actually I might see that as a cross-sell and upsell opportunity. So whilst it might be simple to take out process and people and cost, actually Neil's primed for a new car because he's coming to contract end. So let's consider each of those customer journeys in its own right and think, what is the best way to either use technology or people to support that individual journey? So it's not a one-size-fits-all, that when you interact with brand A, it's either all people-based or it's all tech-based. Within each of those interactions that a consumer could possibly have with that brand, let's consider each of those journeys. If I'm, for example, ringing because I'm a dissatisfied customer, perhaps the last thing I want is a complete automation journey that I end up in a loop and I'm not really getting anybody to sound off to and speak to. So perhaps I'm only going to further infuriate my already unhappy customers. Some people may choose that they don't want to speak to their unhappy customers and that they actually decide that let's just push them to automation. And that should be a choice. So my view would be that it's not my choice, Neil, to decide how we interact with our customers. What I would say is, let's look at the half a dozen, or could be a lot more than that, ways that consumers could potentially interact with a brand. And let's look at each of those and let's define what the right, so there's an old term called the happy path. What's the best route to service your customer in those particular instances? And some of those could be a fully automated, AI-supported digital transaction. Get that. Some could be an entirely human, it's hitting the fan. Neil really needs to speak to a human right now. He's got some emergency. He really needs some help. And I'm sure we can think of examples of that. So I don't say it's a one size fits all. I think we look at those customer journeys, and then within each of those, we think about what are the technologies or solutions that we put in place to address those. Some of those decisions will be made about the best outcomes, and some will have a commercial implication on them, because we know when we support some of these processes through digital automation, it's at a lower cost to do so. And sometimes we'll interact with customers who say, I want you to deliver this service, but at a modest or a lower price point. Others will see it as cross-sell and upsell and prepared to invest more in that customer journey because the customer lifecycle value of Neil and interacting with him for the longevity may be really important to me. So I would say there isn't a one-size-fits-all. We look at our customers and we have a sensible conversation with them about how they interact with their customers, and we design solutions that are fit for each of those individual interactions.
And I'm not sure how much you'll be able to share with me here, but just to bring to life what we're talking about, can you share anything around the strategies that you employ at HGS to build and maintain that sustainable value relationships with clients? Maybe a use case or something. I don't know, something to bring that to life.
Well, you have to be careful, because if we share the secret sauce, it's not a secret anymore. It isn't a secret anymore, Neil.
True.
But I think one of the things that I impress upon my teams when they are speaking to potential new customers is to understand their customer's vertical market. What are the challenges that are going on in that market? Understand their own business. Make sure that you really understand that brand before you interact with them. And what are the challenges that are faced with that? We do things like social media listening on not only that brand, but their competitors' brand. So we understand, where does brand A stack and rank against its competitors in the market to give some balance and to, try and view how good they are compared to other people within the market. So let's have a really good level of sort of research and intent before we go and speak to somebody. When we go and talk to them, let's understand, let's find out what their 3-year business plan looks like, for example. So when we first engage with these other organizations, we're coming at it with a really informed view. We know the challenges in your market. We're experts in it. We can give you some real life examples of where we've done something similar before and talk about good referenceability. So it gives them the comfort that we're good guys, that we know what we're talking about. And then let's turn that into actionable insight. So what does that mean for you, Mr. Customer? Understanding your strategy, having spent some time and having a modest view of what that looks like, here are some of the things that we could talk about that are really tangible outcomes to help you support that business plan. Let's not go in there and do all of the few things that I talked about and then go, and here's our AI solution that'll fix all of your problems, back to let's still focus on those fundamentals. So, what I would implore my team to do on every engagement is be insightful, to be knowledgeable about our potential clients and their vertical markets, to be not too salesy. Let's talk to them like real partners and have a sensible conversation about whether we can help them on their journey or not, or part of it. But then really importantly, when we start putting that together in terms of some sort of a proof of concept or a proposal, let's not just write about tech or service levels or whatever. Let's start with, again, documenting the business outcomes and then be really clear about what are we going to do and when to achieve them. And let's commit to that up front. Let's put that in a 3-year or a 5-year plan and contract to it. So let's not just have all of the previous fluff and bluster that salespeople are famous for, particularly in the tech industry, of talking about taking you on this digital transformation journey. Let's create a roadmap, but let's create it on day one, and let's, with a degree of flexibility in it, of course, but let's commit to what are we going to do over time to deliver specific outcomes. What are the implications for the customer, and what are the implications on me? So if all is aligned, what am I going to deliver to you and by when to deliver some business outcomes? So I'm not just professing that in time I'll be a great partner and start bringing innovation to you throughout the lifespan of the contract. What I want to do is be much more focused and commit to a lot of that up front. Clearly, there'll be new tech that will happen on the way, and that roadmap may slightly veer off slightly to the left or to the right, and that's okay. But let's not get to the end of a 3 or a 5-year multi-million-pound agreement and have not delivered against our promises. So bake our promises into a contract from day one is a commitment that I'm willing to make. And I think that's a little bit of a differentiator. So being really clear about what we're going to do, all of those outcomes need to be aligned to the customer's business plan. And essentially, I would hope that gives customers a great deal of comfort that they're engaging with somebody who is absolutely going to deliver in their promises because they've put it in the contract. So I think that's one way that I think that we differentiate from others, and we've done that on multiple agreements with existing customers that we've got in place right now. A lot of the contracts that we've got have got some in commercial confidence, and I can't really share the specific details on specific brands. What I can tell you is, I'd say at least 25% of the contracts that I've signed up to in the last 12 months have got outcomes in there that are around digital transformation and changing the current operation from, for example, a people-based, relatively transactional process into a much more digital process, that we're starting to embed that into the technology. So that's increasingly becoming a contractual obligation. So my clients, my customers, who I'm also accountable for because I'm the chief customer officer as well as the chief revenue officer. So I'm going to make sure that whatever we promise up front, I'm absolutely accountable for delivering in the future. So, I think having some commitment within your contracts is is really important so that customers are not disappointed and they've not just heard another sales pitch, which professes to do all sorts around digital sexy technology, including AI. But then 3 to 5 years later, they're a little bit dissatisfied because actually there's no real outcomes from that.
And I'm curious, when you're taking someone on that digital transformational journey and you're implementing digital automation and AI solutions, are there any differences between doing that in the public sector compared to the private sector? Because there used to be a perception that public sector moves so much slower and it's so much harder to get the funding and get things moving, etc. Is that still the case? Are there any differences?
Yeah, I think so. I think process automation in its various guises has evolved. So putting it in the public sector, and I've done a lot of this, putting in things like robotic process automation into optimizing standard processes in government is now widely adopted. And I don't think it's a barrier as it was previously. One of the previous challenges would be, we put it into a revenues and benefits client up in the northwest of England. One robot replaced essentially 30 people, had greater efficiency, the accountability, the audit trail. There was a whole bunch of benefits that came with it. But politically, it wasn't seen as being the right thing to do because essentially 30 people were reallocated within the organization. So that previously was a challenge. But I think that the dial has moved. And I think putting in automation into the public sector is much more widely adopted. When I talk about automation, I'm not talking about AI. I think that's a whole different ball game. I think we've got some different challenges. I think putting digital automation and AI into the private sector, it really depends on the risk appetite of the organization. I'd say most people are very, very comfortable with it. And therefore, it's an easier dialogue. But there are some barriers. And I think, largely having, more than 20 sort of new clients that I've secured with a simple automation solution. And what I mean by that is it's not part of a big BPO outsource. It was a pure automation play. The time from board approval to then implementing those solutions are typically long and challenging. And that's often because the internal IT teams have a problem with things that they don't own or they don't know very well. So there've been many, many times, Neil, that and this is in the private sector, not the public sector, where the kind of, these kind of, grey underworlds of these IT people that we know and love, it's all a little bit Hogwarts sometimes, isn't it? The time from saying, here's a really, really solid business case of how we're going to implement a new solution that's going to improve processes and reduce cost, are just, 6 months later are still not implemented because of the risk and challenges that come with the IT and IT security teams and whatever. So I've actually seen it easier to put in things like RPA into the public sector than I have into some private sector organizations. AI, though, I think is a whole different thing. Even come across a couple of customers that I've spoken to in the last few weeks that have developed their own in-house AI tool because they don't want it as publicly available information. They want to use that tool to be garnering insight and information and give suggestions and next best actions based upon their own intelligence within their own organization. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic between public and private. I think the legacy thought process of public sector being slow to market, lethargic, old school, I think is changing. And equally, they've introduced some frameworks in the UK public sector that are specifically around digital automation. So there's a clear intent, and the digital first strategy that was put in place multiple years ago by the public sector as digital first is slowly resonating. But again, public sector in terms of CX, they are all still very happy to have a lot of people answering a lot of calls because if it's the channel of choice for the customer, they decide not to push them down a digital automation route. So public sector has been pretty good at thinking about their customers and how best to interact with them and not just to force them down a digital route. There are, of course, benefits where public sector have automated processes, such as renewing your vehicle tax. It was a really simple process. You used to have to go to the post office. Post office took a cut of the amount that you paid for your tax. It's now one of the best automated processes that you see in UK public sector. It's been a huge success. So I think there's benefits of both, but I wouldn't necessarily say that the public sector is the laggard that it used to be. but it's certainly easier to have you can have some more dynamic conversations with customers in the private sector because they're not beholden to long and lengthy procurement processes.
And if we were to put all the conversations you've been having throughout the year into one big melting pot, again, I'm curious, what are the biggest challenges businesses are facing this year when integrating digital solutions into their customer service operations? Are there any trends there in what you're hearing, what people are asking for, and how you're helping them?
So I think everybody seems to think they've got to have an AI strategy, or an automation strategy or whatever. And often I do turn it back to what's your CX strategy, and then how does automation help that? There's still a large element in the market of people with wanting the human contact. There's still so we've got to consider the shift of automation as, it's not the whole of the market, it's a percentage of the market. It's those customers and those elements of those processes that can be automated. Then if they'll benefit from automation, then let's look at that. I'd say from a vendor marketplace perspective, everybody's website says AI. Everybody talks about digital transformation. I see fewer and fewer, Neil, use cases of where people have done it and delivered beneficial outcomes. And that's what I'm yearning for, and that's what I want to talk to my customers about is, and here's the I used to call it the so what. So we've got a new tool. So, the so what's it deliver? What are the business benefits? What are the outcomes? And my tech people, of which I've got a significant amount, keep talking to me about new stuff. And I'll say, so what? So what is the business benefit that's going to deliver? And I think, what we're going to see over the next 12 to 18 months, hopefully will be more so what? More of the real outcomes of where this technology has delivered significant benefits. But I'm not sure we're between now and say the end of January, whether we could find many reference cases of where in particular AI has delivered those type of outcomes. I think it might be a little bit longer than the next 3 months. So the trend is to, we are constantly being challenged with customers to do more for less. We need to be available 24/7, which is, is newer than it used to be. Now that we're interacting digitally, people do expect us to be able to communicate with them any time of the day or night, and that's got an impact on our service. The home-based model and work-from-home model has definitely had a shift. So can we ensure that we're still keeping and retaining our good staff to help deliver great customer services in conjunction with the tech that supports that? Many of our tech teams, Neil, are working from home as well as in the office. So we've got quite a shifting marketplace from the kind of immediately post-COVID, everybody was at home, to now some people back in the office, a lot of people with a heady blend of a hybrid model. For me, I think, building that culture of great people and keeping them engaged when they are working from home is really quite difficult. And how do we come together when we're trying to formulate solutions and strategies for customers when we're all disparate? And I'm still a big fan of, from time to time, getting people back into the office, pressing the flesh. Yes, we can talk about all of these cool and interesting technologies that enable us to do things better and in a more automated fashion. But I still think the human in the loop element from a solutioning perspective is really important. So I think our challenge in the CX world going forward will be continue to do more with more channels for less money. I think we'll have some greater ease in deploying some of this tech. The integration of tech has become significantly easier than it has been in the past, and the speed of deployment. Multilingual, importantly, has become much, much, much easier than it has in the past, where I used to need to employ 10 Germans and 10 Norwegians and 10 Russian speakings agents. I can now do that with multilingual chat at a fraction of the cost. So there's some real outcomes that we're seeing from that perspective. The insight and analytics is far greater than we've ever seen before. And that analytics helps us drive different behaviors and give it meaningful information back to the customer. So I think there's a whole collection of things that are evolving. I'm not sure how much of it is completely new news. I do see it as an evolution over the journey over the last maybe 12, 24 months, where tech has played an increasingly important part in customer experience, and it will continue to do so. But I don't think overnight we're going to, kind of open the doors and see a massive shift. I think it will be an evolution over time. And it will, as you mentioned earlier, it will continue to be so on an ongoing basis.
And I suspect I already know the answer to this, but finally, for any aspiring leaders in sales and customer experience management that are listening to this podcast, maybe before our conversation, they were thinking of how they can leverage technology to enhance their operations. What final advice would you offer to them? Probably stop for a moment, right?
Yeah. So I did think about this, and I thought, some of the great advice that I've been given. And so the first one is do the basics really well.
Yeah.
The next would be, as a leader, you can't do any of this on your own. Okay. You need a fantastic team around you. So create an environment which is non-hierarchical, encourages creativity, is open and transparent, and allow people to flourish within that organization. So, whilst leading from the front doesn't mean you have to always be the smartest guy in the room, doesn't mean you have to have the right ideas. It's around creating a team, and a really team of people who feel valued and are empowered to be able to come up with great ideas to help you move forward. Celebrate success. We just don't do that enough. Celebrate success, but then equally importantly, don't be afraid to fail and learn from that failure. Listen to the feedback that you get when something hasn't gone so well. The worst thing to do is to just go and kick the cat and feel a bit grumpy and have a bit of a moan about it. Go and find out what you didn't do as well as your competitors and go and learn from that. So do the basics really well, deliver on your promises, be open and transparent with your customers about what you're good at and what you can deliver. Build a solid team around you of trusted advisors and experts who, really, really help and support you on that journey. Just as I say, be the partner that you would want to be or that people profess to be at the start of the sales process. So focus on doing fewer things and do them really, really well. I guess that's the collection of things that I would perhaps give as a bit of a steer.
Fantastic advice. I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and joining me today, sharing your insights. But before I let you go, I'm going to ask you to leave everyone listening with one final gift, and that is a book that you'd recommend to put on our Amazon wish list. But what are you going to leave us with, and why?
Okay, so I have a military background way back. I read a lot of kind of military content. A lot of the books that you read in that genre are really sort of highlight success in the face of adversity. They're always about some real tough guy that delivers their kind of outcomes, but I don't really think that that's the reality that many of us face. I was in the Royal Marines and I enjoyed plenty of that myself, but I think the challenge is very different in the real world. I think balancing your kind of home life, the challenges and the demands of your children and your personal life with what goes on in business is a real struggle and really, really difficult to do. And I was fortunate enough to hear a presentation by the guy who wrote the book about In Pursuit of Happiness, Chris Gardner. And Chris Gardner was a down on his luck, sales guy in the US. It's famously Will Smith created that character and wrote a book about it. But ultimately, it was about a sales guy who didn't say no, who always felt that he could succeed. So, I felt, having read and had an experience of working in some challenging environments, there could be none more challenging than trying to balance, success in your business life with also having a healthy work and home life balance. And I think that's something that Chris Gardner absolutely empowered in what he did and became a super, super successful person. So In Pursuit of Happiness by Chris Gardner would be my book that I would recommend.
That is a great book. I'll probably add that to our Amazon wish list. And for yourself and HGS, for anyone that just wants to explore this conversation and maybe avoid just getting distracted by the shiny technology and refocus on solving those real world problems, what's the best place to find you or your team online and explore what we talked about today? Where would you like to point them?
So I would point to my LinkedIn. So I'm David Morton at HGS, and I post a lot of content. I read other people's content and I reflect on that, but I'm a real proponent of sharing insight. So I regularly post content onto LinkedIn. So that's a great point. But if anybody out there really wants a conversation around this in more detail, then reach out to us, and I'd be very happy to have a proper conversation with anybody that wants to have a more detailed dialogue in this subject.
And I would encourage anyone listening to do just that. I could chat to you for hours about this stuff. And right from the very beginning of our conversation, talking about the role of the Chief Revenue Officer and how that has evolved and how they need to do more, or a lot more than what they did a decade ago. And so much about not getting too distracted by the shiny technology, focusing on solving real-world problems and getting people involved. That human element, so important. Pure gold for me, but just thank you for sharing that and your story today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
So big thank you to David for sharing his valuable insights into the evolving world of customer service and technology and the role of people. I think we learned today about the role of the Chief Revenue Officer, how it has evolved significantly, becoming more strategic and central to business growth, and how technology is playing a pivotal role in enhancing customer service. But it's crucial to remember that it should always align with the business strategy, and balancing digital solutions with AI with the human touch remains essential. And customers often seek personal interaction. We cannot forget that. It's all about creating seamless, efficient, and human-centric customer journeys. That's where the magic happens. So if you found today's conversation as enlightening as I did, please share your thoughts on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Send me a DM at Neil C. Hughes. Let's continue this dialogue. But that's it for today. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.